Hi, my name is Walt Goodridge, a Jamaican living on Saipan. I'm a former civil engineer with a Bachelor of Science from Columbia University. Years ago, I quit my job to pursue my passion full-time. Eventually, I escaped the New York rat race and moved to this side of the world to explore the Asia-Pacific region. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, in fact, the fellow who introduced me to Saipan, called and wanted to know if I would mind getting on a Zoom call with a friend of his. This friend, who lives in the States, wants to get married, but he doesn't want to settle for a Western woman. So he wants to do his wife quest here on this side of the world. And my friend wants to know if I'd be open to sharing some insights, information, perspectives with him. So I said, sure. Topic came up as to whether Saipan would be a good place for him to have his home base while he does his searching. So this was my response.
I don't see women competing to be men or to be the dominant one in the relationship.
Right.
Yep. So yeah, man, really
interesting.
Really fascinating stuff, and I'll share all of that with your friend. But he needs to experience it for himself, because you don't know what you don't know. So I can tell him things are different, but he'll still be looking at it through an American lens. So he needs to see it here, needs to see the smiles, needs to hear the giggles, needs to, see a girl actually be excited to be approached, for him to see that it's real. But he's got to, he could miss it if he's not aware that it's happening. He could actually get a good signal from someone, but misinterpret it as rejection. Because that's what he expects. So I don't know what his background is. I don't know what his dating history is. But that's my biggest advice, is to realize that there's a lens that you're seeing the world through that doesn't need to be there, and that is just one reality of the male-female dating game.
Actually, that right there is enough to. I mean, are there other people that are doing podcasts that are talking like this?
I don't. To somewhat, yes. I listen to a couple guys, but I don't know if they have. I'm trying to find the thing that makes my perspective a little bit unique. So, being from another country, having lived out here, a lot of people are focusing on the Philippines. I'm hoping that there's something valuable about it. I've recorded what I just said, so I'm gonna just put it on a podcast style. I didn't film anything, so I don't have a video of it, but I'll just transcribe it and put it in a podcast style with maybe a few different images around on the screen, and I'll put it out there this week and see what happens. Get some questions in advance, that's fine, or he can send it to me, or he can just keep them and use it for the call. But yep, tell him definitely excited about doing it. We'll answer any questions he has, and we'll take it from there. Yeah, man. Cool.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Yep. So, any idea what time you think you might want to do it?
So you are, what's the time?
It's 4:30 a.m.
What's the time difference
It's
now?
4:30 a.m. now on Saturday morning.
So you're 16 hours ahead.
Okay. All right. If you need to talk to him also, just let me know within the next couple hours, so I can plan and. Okay.
I'll coordinate with him and then I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay.
Later.
This question is from someone who's actually making the move from the States to live on Saipan, and he says, I appreciate the courtesy and politeness of everyone I've worked with on Saipan and try not to offend kind people. Locals seem to address others more formally than in the mainland and still use Mr., Mrs., or Miss. Where I come from, however, virtually no one uses these titles, and I'm just referred to by my first name. And he wants to know, I guess, what he should do, if he should insist that people refer to him in the way that he'd like. And my advice is No. You are the visitor. You are the foreigner. You are the one who's coming to this culture. So my advice is not to insist on doing things the way that you're used to doing it, but be open to the fact that things are done here differently, here in Southeast Asia and in other parts of the world. So you should be a little more flexible to let people refer to you in the ways that they see fit. It doesn't matter that I'm a U.S. permanent resident going to Cambodia. I am bound by whatever regulations pertain to me as a Jamaican passport holder. The question is, and I get this one a lot on the SaipanLiving.com website, the question is, do I need a visa to enter Saipan? The short answer for U.S. citizens is no, you do not need a visa. Saipan is part of the U.S. for immigration purposes, so you can go to Saipan the same way you can go to Jersey or New York or California. However, you will be traveling internationally, possibly, because you could actually travel from the mainland to U.S. mainland to Hawaii to Guam and then Saipan. So the short answer is no. But if you are not a U.S. citizen, there are some certain things that you need to know to answer that question. The first is there's something called the U.S. Visa Waiver Program, and that allows passport holders from 40 different countries to come to the United States without need of a visa in advance. So essentially you get a visa on demand, but you do have to fill out an ESTA, E-S-T-A, and I'll have links to all of these in the description. But a few tips I would like to mention that'll make life a little bit easier. First is, even though the name of my channel is Discover Saipan and my website is Saipan Living, and my other website is Saipan Bookings, technically Saipan is just one island of a 15 island chain called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, CNMI, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. So when you see official documentation from USCIS, Immigration and Naturalization Service, or the Border Patrol, they will mention CNMI, and that's how we refer to ourselves here in these islands. We here in the CNMI refer to ourselves as the CNMI. So be careful that when you're reading official documentation, anything that mentions CNMI is referring to Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and ostensibly the other 12 islands as well. But the ones that are inhabited are Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. The other thing that you might see is NMI, Northern Mariana Islands. All right, so when it comes to official regulations and entry requirements, make sure you're looking for things that say either Saipan, Tinian, and Rota, which is where they'll usually say Northern Mariana Islands or the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. That's one. Keep in mind again that Guam is a separate entity altogether. Its own government, its own flag, it's a territory, whereas Saipan is a Commonwealth. But it is not. There are rules that apply to Guam that do not apply to Saipan. So don't make the mistake of thinking that they're all the same, even though geologically they are all part of the volcanic structure called the Mariana Islands. So just to be clear, the entry requirements are different for Guam than they are for Saipan in certain regards. All right. Next thing I would suggest is not to take any information on any single website as the gospel, as they say, for a number of reasons. There are still people who are, well, first of all, you should only be getting your information from government websites. So that's either U.S. federal websites, .gov, or if Saipan government, CNMI government websites, that is .gov.mp for Mariana's Protectorate. Make sure you're not going to a .com, or because a lot of sites may be set up in order to provide a service to you, There's nothing wrong with that, but the information that they provide may not be the latest, may not be accurate, and it may be worded in such a way that you believe you need them in order to facilitate, whatever it is that you want to do. Most of the things that you need to do, whether it's traveling to Saipan or traveling to Vietnam or Cambodia, should and can be done directly through the government website, through the government agency. You don't need to go through a third party in order to get things done. So just make sure you're getting your information from an official website, like a Korean, I think is .go.kr. So you can look it up. What are the official government websites for whichever places you're going to. But back to Saipan. Some people have contacted me and they'll say something like, okay, I am coming from Japan and I have I'm a Australian citizen, but I'm a permanent resident of Japan. How, what are the regulations for me? So the bottom line rule is, it doesn't matter where you're a permanent resident of. What's used to determine your admissibility to any country is usually, I haven't been to every country, but it's usually your passport. The passport is what's the thing. So it doesn't matter that I'm a US permanent resident going to Cambodia. I am bound by whatever regulations pertain to me as a Jamaican passport holder. So your status in any other country, permanent residency, makes no difference at all, for the most part. There may be exceptions that I'm simply not aware of, but it's your passport that will determine the rules that apply to you. Okay? The short answer for people who are coming from a country other than the 40 that are part of the visa waiver program, if you go to my saipanliving.com website, or if you go to my Saipan bookings, there should be a link that says, do I need a visa to travel to Saipan? Click on that link and you'll see all the countries in the world, and you'll either see a red stop sign or a green go light. If it's green, that means you can come without a need of securing a visa in advance. If it's red, that means stop, you have to get a visa first. So that's all I can think of for now. So the answer for US citizens, no, you do not need a visa. And by the way, as I said, in theory, you could travel from the mainland and stay only in US territories and US possessions, from the mainland to Hawaii to Guam to Saipan. And since it's all basically within the US, you technically don't need a passport. If anyone has done that, or if you know someone who has done that, definitely let me know. I'd love to see how that, if it actually works. Of course, most people traveling internationally in any regard or over huge oceans will usually have a passport. But technically it is possible, and I'd be curious to know if you've done it. So anyway, that's the answer to the question, do I need a visa to enter Saipan? The answer is yes and no. This is actually from a live stream I did for my Passion Profit channel, but the topic of Saipan came up that answers a recent question. Important to not need other people's validation, not need other people's feedback. People can only advise you to the degree of their reality. If you want to learn how to become an entrepreneur, you don't talk to somebody who's a lifelong employee. Good advice that I would give anyone who is contemplating it is, do not seek the approval, validation, permission, support, advice of anyone who has not already done the same thing. All right? Keep your own counsel. Don't believe that other people are smarter than you. They may be intelligent, but they can only pull their knowledge from a pool that they are currently swimming in. So if you are contemplating leaving your job and becoming a passionpreneur, if you are contemplating escaping America and moving to the Philippines or to Kazakhstan or wherever it is you want to go to, there are people who will say that you're doing something foolhardy. There are people who will tell you that it's dangerous over there and you need to be careful, because I read this story about this one guy who went there and he got kidnapped. And so it's very important. You do not need anyone's permission, support, validation, feedback in order to make your decision. Hopefully you have a working mind and you can reach certain conclusions on your own. I'll tell you something. When I was considering moving to Saipan, I looked on the internet And I realized that there was a website called, and it's defunct now, but and I have never actually uttered the domain out loud, but it basically said Saipan is no good. Saipan is no good. And those of you who might be familiar with that old website might be familiar. But anyway, there was a disgruntled individual who worked here on Saipan, and when he left, he had such a bad taste in his mouth that he devoted a whole website to destroying the um, reputation of this island on a public forum. I made a decision at that time not to look at it, and to this day, all these years later, I have never seen what that site was about, because I knew at that time that if I looked at, I was living in New York at the time. I had already quit my job several years before, and now I was going to move to Saipan to start a new life. If I looked at that website, knowing just from the URL that it was a negative website, I didn't want that negativity influencing my mind, influencing how I perceived life here on Saipan. So I made a decision not to look at it. And similarly, my point is, similarly, you can make a decision not to take people's advice. You know, even if it's your mother, even if it's your father, they have your best interest at heart, but you don't need to take their advice. You're an adult. You can make a decision on yourself. And second part, if it turns out to be the wrong decision, and I don't believe there are any wrong decisions, if you're following your passion, if you're following your purpose, there are just stages that you'll get to get to where you're going. So things may not work out here, but you take another step forward. As I had said before, once I quit my job, I actually got evicted 3 different times from 3 different apartments. But I never looked at it as a failure. I just looked at it as a growth process, as, you know, development, as an evolution that eventually I'd get to where I want to get to. That is something that I've seen over and over again, where people have an expectation, have a belief system, and they come here and that belief system is reflected in their experiences. POW Hawaii Tours asked an interesting question yesterday during the live stream that I wanted to get into a little bit deeper. The question was, how do locals feel about outsiders moving here? So first, let me say that, you know, the majority of the population of the island is outsiders. The majority is outsiders. Even among the indigenous population, the Carolinians, you know, are from Caroline Islands. So the tradition of migration is nothing new to these islands. We have contract workers, we have people from Australia, we're right in the middle of Asia, so we've got Koreans and Japanese and Filipinos and Chinese all living here. So the concept of having outsiders here is nothing new. What I can tell you though is that yes, there are going to be certain stereotypes that follow you around, and I mentioned this in my Jamaican in Asia channel. There are going to be certain stereotypes that follow you around based on your nationality. So, you know, it's widely known that Americans are a certain way. It's widely known that Chinese are a certain way, or Koreans or somewhat. So there are going to be stereotypes that you can either choose to perpetuate or choose to break out of. But your overall acceptance within the community is going to be based, as I mentioned in the live stream, on how you as an individual act. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, what is more important, more so than how the locals perceive you, is something else very important, and I really believe this. So I'll tell you a story, and I've read this in several different books on personal development, personal growth. So the story goes something like this. So there's an old man who lives just outside of town, and he lives at sort of like a crossroads where travelers from distant lands come, and they can either make a right and go to the town, or they can keep going along the highway to another destination. So he lives right there, so he sees a lot of travelers coming and going. And he's sitting out there with his grandson, and Traveler comes by and says, hey, old man, I'm thinking of going to this town. What are the people there like? And the old man says, well, let me ask you, what are the people like where you come from? And he says, well, the people where I come from are pretty nice. They're very friendly, they're welcoming, and it's a good place. I just want to see the world. And the old man says, well, I think you'll find the people in this town pretty much the same way. And the fellow goes and he, goes into town. A few minutes later, another traveler comes by and he says, hey, old man, I'm thinking of going to this town. How are the people in this town? And the old man says again, how are the people where you come from? And he says, well, they're a bad lot. That's why I'm leaving. They're cold and unfriendly, and they're nosy, and and I don't like them. And the old man says, well, I think you'll find the people in this town to be pretty much the same way as well. So he says, yeah, I figured, and he kept going. So of course his grandson is a little confused by this, and of course you can see the moral of the story. The moral, as he told his grandson, is people will pretty much create their own realities, and the reality that you experience in any given place is really a reflection of who you are. So that's the moral of the story, and I really believe that. I really believe that what you tend to experience is going to be a reflection, because spiritually speaking, metaphysically speaking, there's only one of us out there. So the reality that you experience is a reflection of what you expect, a reflection of who you are, and the world reflects that back to you. Now, there are certain things that are different. People definitely are friendlier here in the Pacific, but to a certain extent, I find, now from my own experience as well as the experience of others, that you tend to get what you expect. There is such a thing called confirmation bias, and you will more often than not be biased towards experiences and interpretations of experiences that tend to confirm things you already believe. So if to give you some examples, if you believe that all men are a certain way, or if you believe all women are a certain way, if you believe all Americans are a certain way, or all Pacific Islanders are a certain way, you will tend to seek out and to a certain degree even create experiences that don't exist in reality to confirm, so that you can say, see, I was right, they're all alike. And that is something that I've seen over and over again, where people have an expectation, have a belief system, and they come here and that belief system is reflected in their experiences. And it's I can tell you from my own experience, every time I go to China or wherever I go, Vietnam, China, Thailand, Laos, the reception is always great. People roll out the red carpet. In China, people are very friendly and welcoming, and come up to me and want to interact, want to take pictures, want to be my friend. So that's my experience. But there was one day that I was walking through the streets of Hainan, a little island off the south coast of China. And for whatever reason, I was in my New York mode. I was in my head walking alone, and I'm walking on the street, and on the other side of the street, I'm getting closer to where my hostel is, and I see a group of Chinese guys, and they're staring at me. And in my mind, again, for whatever reason, I just happen to be in New York mode. I'm starting to, have thoughts in my mind about, what are these guys staring at, and here's the thing, you can make up stuff that doesn't exist, and I've seen it happen. And you can make up a scenario in your mind. You can make up reasons in your mind as to why people are looking at you, why people are staring. So I'm in that zone, and I'm, getting closer to them, and my, brow is furrowed, and I'm not smiling. And it's only when I get close enough to them that, they all start smiling and give me a thumbs up. And, so it was just, they were happy to see a foreigner. They, I've never seen a Jamaican walking through the streets of Hainan, so I think those same guys maybe later on came and asked me if I wanted to hang out and smoke with them. But So my point is that you can create in your mind even things that don't exist. So one of my best bits of advice is, as much as possible, for you to come with an open mind, come with a clean slate. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because if you've been steeped in a certain reality, if you believe things are a certain way, it's very difficult for you to see reality in any other way. Hopefully, being here long enough and seeing certain um, realities, and hopefully having having it confirmed by other people who will say, yeah, they're pretty friendly here, and you'll start to realize that a different reality is possible and does exist. But it is also true that if you come here with a certain amount of cynicism, if you come here with a certain amount of certain pessimistic outlook and expectations of people, then you can bring that reality with you and sadly create that reality even when it doesn't exist, and therefore confirm things that you already believe. So it's a very tricky question, because so to wrap up, what's more important than how locals perceive you is how you perceive yourself in relation to the rest of the world, because there's a very good chance that that is what you will end up creating if you're not careful. So now, at the same time, I've also run into people who have had bad experiences, and again, it could be because they were creating them, making them up. But people have said that there was one guest I had, a tour client, who mentioned that her daughter was working in Hawaii and she didn't feel welcome there. So there could be other factors, it could be her personality, it could be, but what I delved a little deeper, and what I thought was interesting was that this person worked in education. And I've never worked as an employee here on this side of the world, so I don't know what the dynamics are of that interaction. So it could be something to do with, a mainlander or foreigner having an influence, an outsized influence on the values that children are being raised under. So I could see a scenario, for example, where people might be suspicious or wary of someone coming from the outside teaching their children. Again, I'm just speculating because I don't know. So there could be other factors, could be other dynamics that could explain why someone may feel welcomed or not welcomed. It could have to do with, the job that they're doing, or what have you. But I think in a lot of cases, people are just being shown what their inherent and their predisposed biases are. So that's my take on that question. Thanks again, Apau Hawaii Tourist, for asking the question, and I hope that's helpful. So essentially, come here with an open mind, with an open slate, and create your own reality here on Saipan and anywhere that you go, whether it's Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, or wherever. You have the ability to create your own reality. Okay, Tim 4525 asks, in response to my video, do I need a visa to visit Saipan? The question is, if a U.S. citizen wants to live and remain on Saipan, do they need to maintain a passport, or can they forget about needing a passport in their future? Okay, that's an interesting one. First of all, if you are living in the mainland US and you are flying to Saipan, in theory, and I've mentioned this before, in theory, you could fly domestically all the way from the US to Saipan. For example, you would fly from the US to Hawaii, which is also US, to Guam, which is also US, to Saipan, which is also US. And theoretically, you would not need a passport for that journey. You would need some other. I've been told that um, the new driver's licenses have information as to date of birth or country of birth, so it might be possible. But if you've done it, let me know so I can share that with other people. The second thing is, though, I would suggest that you maintain a passport. You never know when you might need it, especially since you're out here in the middle of the Pacific. There might be a reason why you may find yourself in Japan, may find yourself in the Philippines. So it is a wise move to maintain a passport at all times. All right. But if you are not planning on leaving, I'll give you an example. So for example, you might find that you have to make an emergency trip to the Philippines for some health reason. You may find that you have to go to Japan for, for whatever reason. So I think it's always a good idea, especially if you're living on a little island in the middle of the Pacific, that you maintain your passport. But in theory, the answer to your question is yes, you could go without maintaining your passport because you are on U.S. Land. But I wouldn't advise you do that. Hope that's helpful. See you in the next video. I've noticed in the last few months that there's been an uptick in people purchasing my book, my relocation guide, Saipan Living. And over the years, I've noticed a lot of people asking different questions, and especially since the pandemic, it seems that interest in running off to a tropical island has increased. So I'm updating the Saipan Living for 2023, and I'll be asking and answering some questions here on the channel. So the first question that I often get is, should I choose Saipan or Guam? And my short answer, you already know, is Saipan. And this is not to cause a rift between the two islands, but personally I prefer Saipan. It's smaller. I'm a bit of a hermit and recluse myself, so I don't like the hustle and bustle, if you will, of Guam. It's a bit too big for me. And I find things are a little more personable here. It's a smaller community. People are, it's easier to get to know people. You see them pretty much every day if you step out of your house. So if you like a little bit more modernity, you can look into Guam. But I personally, for many other reasons that I'll share over the course of this series, but I personally prefer Saipan, a little more natural, less manicured. That's something that I prefer. I know if you go anywhere in the States or even Hawaii, you'll drive, from one city or village to the next, and it looks pretty much the same. Here on Saipan reminds me a lot of Jamaica. It's not manicured to that degree. Some people like that. I personally don't. I like a natural look to my surroundings, since that's what I grew up with. But anyway, just testing out some new settings on my camera and lighting. So wanted to say happy holidays again to everyone who's subscribed to the channel. And as we say in Jamaica, big things are going. So more stuff coming for you in the new year. Thanks for watching. In certain countries, they'll refer to you as uncle, to sort of indicate that they respect the fact that you are older and are deserving culturally of a certain amount of deference, a certain amount of respect. So I remember when I was growing up in Jamaica, as a child growing up, you would never refer to an older person by their first name. It was just unheard of. You could get in serious trouble. You would not only get chastised, you might get a slap across the face. Many of us grow up as children, and we never really know our aunts and uncles, even our parents' first, full names. They're only uncle this or uncle that or aunt this or grandma and grandpa, so you don't know. I remember finding out the first name of a teacher. This was back in second and third grade, and it was sort of like a big deal that we as children actually knew the first name of our teacher. Of course, you would never use that. Majut Sushi Slice of Life asks, with Saipan being only 5.5 miles at its widest and only 12 miles along, can most things like groceries, restaurants, etc. be easily reached on foot? I used to walk a lot as a young person, and my legs are still pretty strong even in my late 50s. The thing to understand about Saipan is that it's not laid out like Manhattan. It's not laid out in a grid system. So even though it's only 13 miles by 5 miles, to get from one place to another that may look near to each other on the map might actually require a long detour in order to get to. So If this were laid out like Manhattan in a grid system, for example, then you could be assured that to get from point A to point B would just require going up a certain number of blocks and going across a certain number of blocks. But here on Saipan, it may require you to go all the way to the end of the island to get the only road that goes up to that part of the, to that other part of the island. So it's not as straightforward, not as easy as it may seem. Now, having said that, I would advise you or suggest that if you want to walk, if you want to be one of the few people who walk on the island, then you should absolutely do that. In fact, when I first came to the island, I did that as well. I wanted to get to know the island. I wanted to, exercise. I wanted to enjoy the sunshine. So I did that for a while. But after a while, I guess I succumbed to peer pressure as well, or just the fact that certain things are easier done by car. Most people have cars on the island or have access to cars or taxis or friends and do not walk. Very few people actually walk from place to place. The few who do stand out, and they're mostly mainlanders like yourself or like myself who have come here and haven't gotten the memo yet. But I would suggest do it for the first, few weeks or so. I did it on bicycle as well as on foot for a while, and then eventually I gave in and got a car. But I did go for several years without a car. When I went to China for 6 months, I sold my car, and when I got back, because I lived in Susupi, I was near to a library, near to the post office, within walking distance of a supermarket, so I actually did without a car for a while. So depending on what your circle, circle of exploration is, you could do without one very easily. But if you want to get up to Capitol Hill to take care of some business, and then down to Susupi to take care of some other business, then you might find that it's easier to drive. But the other new development in the plan is that Saipan just instituted a public transportation system. So there's now a bus that runs from Garapan all the way down to the south end of the island and then back up again. So if and as things expand, you might be able to access more of the island through public transportation, but now it might actually be a little more doable to do things on foot. So I hope that's helpful. So the bottom line is it's trickier than it seems based on the topography of the island, but it certainly is doable for anyone who has the leg strength to keep doing it for an extended period of time. Okay, the question is, are passport bros going to Saipan? Is Saipan a good destination for passport bros? So, in case you're not familiar, I'll bring you up to speed. That men as well as women throughout history have always gone to different locations, different destinations in search of things that they can't find in their home countries. Whether it's spices, whether it's opportunity, whether it's romance, whatever. So people have always done that. However, the current generation has dubbed the concept and the trend passport bros, particularly men in Western countries, primarily the United States, who get their passports because a lot of US citizens don't even have a passport, and they end up going to different countries in search of something that they feel they can no longer find in the United States. And some of the locations they'll go to are South America, they'll go to Mexico, they'll go to the Philippines, they'll go to Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, many places in Southeast Asia. And what they're looking for is relationships with women who dance to a different drum beat. They are no longer interested or intrigued by Western women, so they are going to different countries in search of more traditional relationships, more respect, more femininity. Right now, especially among the majority population in the United States, at the top of the list is generally the Philippines and Thailand. Here on Saipan, when I came many years ago, it was a different situation. There were many more single women here. because of the garment factories. But over the years, things have slowed down a bit because of the reduction in the workforce due to the contract work phasing out of the CW1 visa, the garment factories closing, so a lot of the girls went back home, and all my dating prospects dried up. And so it could still be an option, because from here you can do what I do and use this as a home base to go to Vietnam or Thailand or China or Southeast Asia if that's what you're looking for. Here on the island, probably still opportunities, but not as much as it used to be in the past. Now again, you got to take somebody else's word for it, because I don't do a lot of, over the years I've become more of a hermit and more of a recluse. So though you may see me on YouTube, though you may see me doing tours and doing these videos, from a social standpoint, I don't go out to clubs. I spend a lot of time just building my business. There might be people who have a completely different perspective, those people who are into the nightlife, who are hanging out with the tourists, So that's just my take, that it's still a better deal than you'll find, let's say, in New York, where I lived for many years. But the pickings are not as abundant as they were in the past. So hope that answers the question. I'll definitely do a follow-up to that and get some input from some of the other guys on island. But hope that helps, and I'll see you in a future video. If I were in Jamaica and I forced a child to refer to me as Walt, I would be inviting a certain level of disrespect, whether knowingly or not. You're essentially, if everyone else in the culture is afforded a certain amount of respect by referring to them as Mr. Walt, then I'm putting myself on the peer level, with a 10-year-old or with a 9-year-old, and that's inviting a certain amount of disrespect. So my advice to you is no, don't insist on that. Let people refer to you in the ways that they see culturally fit. Okay, I like this question. Do you think there might be a viable business prospect for a small foot ferry service? I'm going to be looking for business investment opportunities, especially those which provide a valuable community service and employment for locals. And like me, there are entrepreneurs who want to start up their own business so that they're not dependent on an employer. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Doing Business on Saipan, and I shared some, in addition to the process of actually setting up a business, I also shared some business ideas, and a lot of those still hold. One, if I can give you the best advice, to answer the question, there used to be a ferry service that ran between Saipan and Tinian, and that was before the garment factories closed, and that's another video. But before the garment factories closed, there were at least 20,000 additional residents here on Saipan. A lot of girls working, Chinese girls working in the garment factories, girls from Thailand, Vietnam. And so there was a lot more demand for the ferry to go to Tinian. A lot of them would go there to gamble, at the casino. Once the garment factories closed, then the ferry service stopped, and there was it had a major effect on the economy overall. So now I don't believe that there's enough of a demand to sustain a ferry service, unless you get some sort of dispensation from the government, some subsidizing of the expenses. It's going to be insurance, there is fuel, maintenance of the craft, all sorts of stuff. Right now, the only way to get from Saipan to Tinian is through our single commuter airline, Star Marianas. And at one point there were three. There was Freedom Air, there was Cape Air, and Star Marianas. Now, again, as the economy slows down, it's can only support one. A lot of the information in the book, Doing Business on Saipan, is a little outdated, actually. But the business idea information is still valid. One of the things that I always tell people is you have to be, if you're doing a little research on Saipan, one of the mistakes that a lot of people have done in the past is that they've assumed that the population represents their market. So they may say, hey, I want to set up a Starbucks here on Saipan. What's the population? Well, the population is 55,000, 48,000. So they say, great, that's enough to sustain the business, I'll start it. But then they realize that we have so many different communities here with different lifestyles, with different worldviews. So you have a Filipino community that might be contract workers, you have Chinese, you have Bangladeshis, you have Koreans, you have Japanese, and just because a Starbucks works in the mainland doesn't mean that it'll work here, because culturally it may simply not be the thing for the Filipinos or the Koreans or the Japanese. So they end up realizing that who they are targeting are simply the few mainlanders who've moved over here, who have come with that Starbucks mentality, and that's definitely not enough to sustain a business. So it's very important as a potential business owner to understand the demographics as well as the psychographics of the population here. Very important, because your Chinese market is very different from your Filipino market. What they will spend money on will be different from what Chamorros and Carolinians and Pacific Islanders and Koreans and Japanese and Chinese and Thailanders will spend their money on. So you have to have a really clear understanding of who you're really targeting with your business. So with that said, get a copy of Doing Business on Saipan, and you may get some ideas of what is needed and what might be sustainable and viable here as a business idea. Thanks for the question. Talk to you in the next video. In Jamaica, growing up, if I meet someone, a friend, I run into a friend, even if I haven't seen them in a while, we just nod, say, hey, how are you doing, that sort of thing. We wouldn't shake hands. The way I grew up, shaking hands is a very formal thing that business people do to each other, and it's distancing. So I would never shake hands with someone who I consider my friend, because that's sort of pushing the friendship into the realm of being formal and businesslike. So when I originally came to Saipan, I said that to somebody, a fellow Chamorro fellow, because I felt that we were becoming friends. I mentioned to him that we don't have to shake hands because we're friends. Would you shake hands with your brother every morning when you wake up and meet him? That was my rationale, and he didn't take that well. And a couple hours later, he sent me an email basically cursing me out for being disrespectful. So I learned my lessons. This question is from someone who's actually moving to Saipan. He's been following the channel for a while and finally made the decision to actually come to Saipan to live. And he has a few questions about blending into life here on the island. And the first question is, I've become accustomed to video recording everything on a rental vehicle before driving it due to scams. Because Saipan is a small place and everyone seems to know everyone else, would that be seen as odd? Absolutely not. That would not be seen as odd. And it brings up a point. Yes, Saipan being essentially a small island in the middle of the Pacific, people tend to know each other quite well, and the rules, or more accurately, the enforcement of certain rules and policies tend to be not as stringent as they might be in the States. However, it's still a business. For example, if you're renting a car from a local company or even a major company, Hertz, Alamo, they still are running a business, and there are still expenses they have, maintenance costs, insurance requirements. So they are just as vigilant about damage to the vehicle as you should be. So no, it would not be perceived as odd. You are encouraged to take pictures. I encourage you to do it, because people make mistakes. Things can be overlooked initially, so having that evidence is a good move wherever you are, no matter how small the island is, or no matter how trusting and forgiving the people might be. So good question. Hug Hansford asked, are there any garages or a lot of mechanics for the car repairs? Haven't seen anything about that online. And the answer is yes. There's no shortage of mechanics to fix the vehicles. But as I mentioned in a previous video, what I would suggest is to buy a car for which a brand for which parts are easily available. That would probably include Toyota as one of your first choices. There are a lot of Toyotas here on the island, whether it's the pickup trucks or, just Yaris's or Corollas like I have. And so that's one of the wiser things to do, is to get a car that is easily serviceable because of the abundance of other vehicles that are here on the island. So it might be very difficult to get parts for Mercedes or, for other cars that are, or BMWs, other cars that are not in abundant supply here. AZVT7DT asked, hello there, how is the crime there? Did you lock your car while you were in the market? At the market in particular, yes, I locked my car because that's just simply not a wise thing to do in such a public, chaotic setting where people might get careless, and where it's obviously a place where money is being exchanged and goods are being purchased, and so it wouldn't be wise anywhere on the planet to leave your car door open. But there are other places I've gone. When I go to the supermarket, when I go to various other establishments, that yes, I'll leave my car open because I'm just going in for a short time. There have been instances where I've left my car overnight open outside my apartment, and in one instance I actually left my wallet on the seat and then got up the next morning and it was still there. But it wouldn't be wise for you to do that. But to answer your question, crime is lower than it would be in the States. So you can feel a lot safer. People do go out walking at night. Kids do walk to and from school on their own, for those who do. So it is less crime-ridden. And I often tell this story. It's been years, many years now. But when I first came to Saipan, I remember watching the evening news to get a sense of what the island was like. And I remember the lead story on KSPN News was that a tourist's laptop got stolen on the beach. So, that was the breaking top news at that time. That was in the early 2000s. And sometimes tourists will get targeted because they tend to be careless when they drive their skittle-colored Mustangs to the beach areas. But for the most part, there is little crime here, no gun violence, and it's a pretty safe place to be, provided you don't make yourself a target by doing something foolish. I would advise anyone moving to this side of the world, observe how things are done, and don't attempt to force a Western, an American, or your own personal wishes on how people behave. You are the foreigner, you are the newcomer, so it's up to you to be respectful of the dominant culture. There's a line that I've resonated with that I found in a book by Harry Brown. It's called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And it takes far less effort to find and move to a society that has what you want than it does to try to change an existing society to meet your standards. If you're moving to a new location, it's not on people to change to meet your standards. It's up for you to change to meet the standards of the existing society. I always tell people that moving to Saipan has been one of the top 3 life decisions I've ever made. Number 1 was joining a network marketing company, and as a result of that experience, I gained the courage to do number 2, which was to quit my job as a civil engineer. And then 3, when Saipan came around, if I hadn't joined a network marketing company, if I hadn't quit my job, I wouldn't have had the freedom to escape the rat race and relocate to Saipan. So they're all connected, but it does rank as one of the top 3 decisions that I've ever made. Now, what do I like about living here? Since I've been here now so long, I'll share with you the positives. And they're mostly positive. There are no deal breakers yet. But if you stick around till the end, I'll share with you at least one negative. So, it won't all be positive. Number 1, the weather. Saipan is pretty much on the same latitude as Jamaica, and I was born and grew up in Jamaica. Saipan is in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the world's most equable temperature, most constant temperature, 79 to 89 all year round. There are some people who like, change of seasons in fall and winter. As an island boy myself, I like, summer all year round. So the weather is one thing. Number two, the people are friendly. Local population, very friendly, very welcoming. So I've enjoyed that and liked that since the beginning. Number three, I like the fact when I was originally looking into moving to Saipan, I discovered that it's on the U.S. postal system, which was a plus. It's U.S. banking system, U.S. currency. So I didn't have to make any drastic changes to the way that I was doing business. If I am fulfilling orders for my books to customers primarily in the United States, then the fact that it's on the U.S. postal system was a definite plus. Didn't have to, as I said, make any drastic changes to my business operations. As a permanent resident, a green card holder, I need to be in the U.S. for a certain amount of time in order to maintain that status. Saipan is officially part of the United States for immigration purposes, so that's a plus as well. I like the fact that Saipan's proximity to Asia. If you check out my Jamaican in China blog and vlog, you will see that I traveled to Southeast Asia, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Laos, Cambodia, and Saipan is located right in the region, so I can use this as my home base for trips and jaunts to different parts of Asia. The pace of life. I like the fact that things are a little slower paced here. It's a small community. It's not as hectic as New York. And people know who you are, and for some people that might be, a negative, but pace of life is pretty slow, and I like that as well. There are certain, like even now, I can sit on the beach for hours at a time and not run into a single person. I can pretend that I'm like Tom Hanks in the Castaway movie, not run into a single human for hours and hours. Along with that pace comes a certain worldview, a certain inertia that sort of retards and impedes progress to a certain degree, or what people refer to as progress. So Saipan in 2023 is pretty much the same as it was when I came here in 2006. And for me, that's a good thing. We're not overrun by some of the what people would call the trappings of progress. So things proceed a little slower, and that's a good thing in my book. Natural life. I can live a natural life here as a vegan, a vegetarian, raw foodist. I can practice my philosophy of living according to sunlight, water, earth, air, and time. There are fruit trees growing naturally. There's mangoes, there's coconuts, there's papayas, so I can live a natural life here and not have to rely 100% on shopping at the supermarket. In fact, the only things that I buy at supermarket are certain items that I got used to in the States, flour bars and Terra chips. But other than that, few fruits every now and then. But for the most part, I shop in farmers markets and live off the land, as it were, eat locally, and live a natural life in this increasingly unnatural world. That's pretty much it for now. There's a whole lot more I can come up with, but I won't take too much more of your time. But as promised, one of the things that comes with a slow pace of life is something that I've been challenged to get used to. I learned to drive, and my whole attitude and worldview when it comes to driving and getting from one place to another was forged in the streets of New York City. That's where I learned to drive, and for fun I would go driving up 6th Avenue in Manhattan with the taxi drivers. So getting used to the slower pace of driving here has been a challenge, but it's a good thing. I mean, with that pace comes a certain sanity when it comes to driving. When you see a pedestrian on the street and everyone stops and puts on their hazard lights and allows the pedestrian to cross, no one is blowing their horns. You know, you come to an intersection and you spend a few moments there telling, you know, the person to go ahead, and they're telling you, no, you go ahead, no, you go ahead. So there's a sanity that comes from, you know, the slower pace as well, that I've just had to get used to, having learned to drive in New York City. But that's it for now. I'm sure I'll be doing another video on more reasons why I like Saipan. You can check out the WeLoveSaipan.com website that I started years ago, that has a lot of other residents' views on what they like about living here. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Leave any comments and questions below, and I'll see you in the next video.
Subscribe.
You know, hear what a man say.